And I'm with the Syracuse Peace Council. I'd like to welcome everyone. And the first order of business before we get going is to have a land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everyone. Need my cheat sheet here because I presume many of you were here on Saturday night, so I'll try not to repeat myself. We are occupying the unceded land of the Onondagas. Onondaga Nation is one of the member nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. That land was violently stolen by our settler colonial ancestors. And with their scorched earth policy, they attempted the complete annihilation of all indigenous people on this land, this country. And what a tragedy. Just imagine if we'd been able, if we wouldn't have had, quote, leaders that were land speculators and were greedy for the land. Just imagine the possibilities of what we could have had instead. If we pursued understanding and cooperation, and that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons to do the acknowledgement, to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee and the Onondaga Nation, because we have so much to learn from them, so much. Just in one principle or concept is the great law of peace. That is a far more sustainable pursuit of societal relations, both politically and environmentally, than this delusional capitalistic pursuit of growth, profit, and empire. So I encourage everyone to learn more about the great law of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. All right, we're going to start the program now, and we're going to begin by thanking all the co-sponsors, and I wanted to stress how many people, how many groups have worked together to bring Baha Hilo to Syracuse. And it's really been a joy to see so many people working for Palestinian rights, and so thanking Justice for Palestine of the Syracuse Peace Council, ArtRage Gallery, Jewish Voice for Peace of Syracuse, Syracuse Collective for Palestinian and Global Liberation, Veterans for Peace, Chapter 51, Students for Justice in Palestine at SUNY Oswego, the Oswego Sociology Club, Women's and Gender Studies at SU, and faculty and staff for Justice in Palestine. So the rough outline for tonight is that we're going to start with some introductory comments by, where did Kayleen go? Oh, you're sitting back there, okay. I'm going to introduce her in a moment, and then we're going to, I will introduce Baha. He'll speak, he's using a PowerPoint, yep. And then we will follow up with questions and answers and a chance for people to join in the discussion. Okay, I'm very happy to introduce Kaylee Marie, who is a scholar and a freedom fighter from Edenwald Projects, which is the largest public housing development in the Bronx, New York City. She currently studies public relations with a focus on gender, women, and sexuality. She's in the process of applying for a master's degree in sociology and African studies. She serves as president of the Oswego Sociology Club and as Minister of Information for Students for Justice in Palestine. She also identifies as an aspiring expert on slavery and abolition, and her research centers on the social and economic experiences of Black women in capitalist society. She has 7 sisters and 2 brothers, and she is passionate about practicing public sociology. And it is a connection she has with Baha as well in studying sociology. Welcome, Kaylee.
That was such a great introduction. Thank you so much. I'm just super honored to be in front of everyone today. As someone who's very new to sociology, fun fact, I've only ever taken 2 sociology classes at Oswego. So, yeah, all this is still very, very new for me. I just began organizing for Palestine back in October. I clearly understood the plight of everything as a Black woman myself. And I always saw a social interaction. I've always seen sociology as a way to fight for a better society because, as we know, a better future is possible. The Sociology Club just started getting up and running again. It was always dead. So a group of students and I found a way to revive the club to talk about why Palestine is a sociological issue and why the professors in the department should be talking about it in their classroom. And all academics should be exercising academic freedom in the classroom. I can't emphasize that enough. So I just wanted to start off with updates in Gaza and what's been happening. It is the 465th day of the genocide, and over 70 Palestinians were killed in Gaza yesterday. The IOF escalates attacks on Gaza City North all day and night during ceasefire talks, targeting homes and hospitals. The IOF bombed the Darajah neighborhood and killed 7+ people, journalists included, and 3 sons. The IOF bombed homes, killing 6 family members and wounding 30+ people. The IOF recently bombed sheltered homes and killed 5 people. The IOF bombed, I don't want to butcher that name. They bombed streets and killed almost 4 people. They bombed Jazawat area. Israeli warships fired and killed 2 people. The Heinz Rajab Foundation filed complaints in Finland, Denmark, and Norway for the IOF sniper trying to escape Sweden investigation. The West Bank, the Palestinian Authority increased Jenin attacks, firing shells and RPG missiles at homes, re-abducting freed prisoners, and the Palestinian authorities forced to shot and injured a kid. During the 101-day North Gaza siege, hostage Dr. Hussam Abu Safaya reportedly held in a notorious torture camp in the West Bank. And today, I'm here to talk about why Palestine is such a sociological issue. Palestinians have no right to education. All of their schools have been bombed. They have no means to learn how to read, no means to learn how to write. The Israeli occupation forces have literally stripped every single opportunity from them with learning. no homes. They have bombed every last home in Palestine for its people. You have Palestinian families who are on camera talking to journalists who have also been butchered by the occupation forces, shedding the awareness about what's actually been happening. You have Palestinian women with their children forced to give birth without any anesthesia. You have frozen babies being frozen by these evil monsters. You also have Palestinian women talking about how Israelis knock on their door and force them to leave, to move another family in right in front of their faces. And in fact, a group of feminist scholars traveled to Palestine in 2011 and documented the atrocious circumstances for women and children. Students are being suspended, they're being arrested, they're being beaten and stabbed because of what's happening in Palestine. SUNY Oswego just put me on student probation. They put me on behavioral probation. What does that mean? Behavioral probation. You want me to behave correctly during the genocide? You want students who pay their hard money, who take out loans, who break their backs to pay for school? You want our tuition dollars to fund this genocide? You want students to stay complicit like you. You want students to calculate to whiteness. But the students at SUNY Oswego are not calculating to whiteness. We are not calculating to the genocide. At Syracuse University, those righteous students hosted a magnificent encampment. So if you are a student at Syracuse University and you are here, I am proud of you. And we stand in full solidarity with you. Those students are not letting up. They were right there fighting hard against those Zionists, trying to scare them away, knocking over their food, yelling in their face. They wasn't backing down. And we was never back down to the racist capitalist system of the United States, who was funding the genocide first-handedly, with billions and billions and billions every day, with the working class's dollars, with the working class's tax-paying dollars. That is the country we live in, where money is being sent to burn and freeze babies. A better future is possible. And with the help and the research of sociology, we can make it possible. Because sociology is a scientific study of human society and social interaction. So we must use social theory to advance society. In part, public sociology is sharing sociology with non-academic audiences, like you all, where we learn from each other. Talk about new ways to fight this bloody occupation. Zionism is the biggest threat to America. Zionism is the biggest threat to the world. As Kwame Ture once said, Zionism is the biggest threat to Africa. And us conscious black people know and are very, very conscious that we must strike Zionism wherever it's at. In the words of Ghassan Kanafani as well. Wherever imperialism lays its body, we strike it and damage it. Everybody in this room has a moral obligation to stand with the Palestinian resistance, with the Palestinian people. It's not over. The fight for a free Palestine is not over. And no, the Palestinians don't need Western saviors. The Palestinian people will free themselves. We must support their resistance. And though our struggles are similar, they provide different paths. We must be in that path for the Palestinians. So when you leave here today, ask yourself, what have I been doing to support the Palestinian resistance? What more could I be doing? Maybe I should join the reading group. Maybe I should go to the Syracuse Peace Council treaty on Friday. Maybe I should support the PSL rally happening January 20th. Right outside the federal building where we fight back. We fight back against racist capitalism, imperialism, transphobia, queerphobia, Islamophobia. Be there with your community, fighting for divestment, fighting for the homeless people in Syracuse Tennis Union, like fighting against Patrick Hogan, the freaking slumlord. Because this is people's power. Right here is where we build true people's power. So we can take back everything that was stolen from us, that was stolen from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, that was stolen from the Native American people, that was stolen from the Palestinians. How do you think black women got here? The black woman was brought to America to be a worker for the racist capitalist system that must be destroyed and turned to a full emancipated socialist society. Think critically about the horrendous apparatus of the United States every single day. Palestine will be free.
Thank you, Colleen. We're very excited and happy to have Baha Hilo here in Syracuse and in the United States. He is a Palestinian from based in Beit Sahor near Bethlehem. I met Baha in 2017 when I went to the West Bank to live for a year as a Fulbright scholar at Birzeit University. I first met him when I went on what I call a political tour that is part of an organization he helped start in 2013. It's called To Be There, and talks about the importance of people actually seeing people being there, seeing the West Bank, seeing how Palestinians live, understanding what's going on. And then I took some more political tours with him. I had people here from Syracuse who visited me in Palestine, and we booked some tours with Baha, and I could see how affected they were by the whole experience, but particularly by meeting Baha and listening to him. I'll say just one more thing, which is it's an amazing mixture of things. I think that I told him I would embarrass him tonight by saying the memory of him that I hold most in my mind is that on one of those tours we began by him giving an introduction at Singer Cafe, and he was talking to a crowd of people, and we were really hanging on his words. But there was a baby in the audience who was kicking up a fuss and was threatening to drown him out. And without missing a beat, Baha bent down, scooped up the baby, and began to jostle and comfort him. At the same time, Then he just continued on with what he was saying to us. And it was very, very heartwarming. So without further ado, I welcome you, Baha, and I'll hand it over to
I think my friend Jonathan would have appreciated that before he sent his child away. Yeah, I would have carried Belen like throughout the whole conversation today. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. And thanks to Callum for speaking her convictions and in a way like showing that the struggle for Palestine like in a way has a lot of cross points with all other struggles for equality, freedom and social justice. It's kind of a test of your consistency on issues that actually matter. Like when you care about women in your neighborhood and their rights, and you don't give a damn about Palestinian women being murdered. When you care about child rights in your neighborhood, but you don't give a damn about Palestinians being, as mentioned, like frozen to death or being murdered, then there's a problem over here. I do understand that the powers in a way behind that keep maintaining and reproducing oppression lack consistency, and on this side we should always be consistent. So without further ado, let's say, yeah, my name is Baha and I've been working on education in Palestine since actually 2006. And what I will be doing today is not kind of explain another form of how we as Palestinians are forced to survive the brutality and savagery of Israeli criminal behavior day in, day out of our lives. I think there's a lot of our lives, whether private or public, a lot of our blood have been exposed. And a lot of examples of survival, whether examples you like or examples you don't like, examples of inspiration, examples of depression, of survival, have been out there. So I will not be speaking about that. I will be speaking mostly on what we as Palestinian people have to put up with and what we are forced to survive. I usually do this back in Palestine, and I have Palestine to show you. You know, like today I will try to do the impossible, which is trying to explain the reality that we are forced to live through, and without having to point it out to you. And after that, we will open up for questions and answers. So when it comes to our reality, when it comes to technology, it doesn't usually help. Okay. When it comes to reality in Palestine has been misrepresented over the past few decades in a way to prevent people from understanding the reality the way it is. And the reality the way it is very, very simple. If you are born to a Palestinian family, you are subject to oppression. If you are born to a Jewish family, you are, your rights and freedoms are kind of granted and protected. But for so long, this kind of reality has been presented or promoted outside to make it really complicated for people to understand it, and people think it's very, very, very difficult or very, very, very complicated with reality. And that the issue that makes it seem complicated or seem difficult to understand really have nothing to do with what's going on in Palestine. but it has to do with the presentation of the place or misrepresentation as it's done by mainstream media, by politicians, and also by academia. So how many of us in the room think or believe the issue in Palestine is very difficult? Or complicated? Complicated. It's a complicated issue. Okay. So how many think it's easy to understand? Okay.
It's painful to understand.
I remind people all the time that understanding something and accepting something are not the same. So, as a person who wants to reject any kind of social phenomena or political oppression, you need to understand it in order to know how to reject it best. So this is what I'll try to do. Reaffirm also for people who believe it's easy to understand. Reaffirm their understanding. So in the beginnings of things, we start reminding people of one basic fact, which is the issue at stake. Like when we're talking about Israel-Palestine, we're made to believe that Israel and Palestine are two separate geographies, like the US and Canada. And there is some kind of conflict between them, right? So if you add any piece of information to this belief, you will be confused by default. Because Israel and Palestine are not two separate geographies. Israel and Palestine are two different words referring to the exact same geography. You show this map to a Palestinian, he'll tell you this is the map of Palestine. How many Palestinians do we have in the room? Yeah. So we all, when we saw this map, we all believe that this is the map of Palestine. You show this map to the Israeli ambassador, they will tell you this is the map of Israel. Actually, this map in particular was taken off the website of the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture, showing agriculture in Israel. So, who's in control of Palestine?
Israel.
The Israeli government is in control of every inch of the land of Palestine. If you want to visit any place, and many of the people in the room visited, right? How many of us visited? Yeah. So if you want to visit any part of Palestine, you get to have approval from Israeli border authorities. To move within or to have access to the place, you have to get approval from the Israeli government. How many people live under Israeli control? Now, if you ask Google this question, how many Palestinians live in Palestine and how many Israelis live in Israel, they'll give you two different numbers. Because even with digital life, there is separation and confusion, The number of people in general that live under direct control of the Israeli government is about 14 million people, 6 million of which were born to Jewish families. The rest of them are Palestinians. And there are a few others. Others is a category that the State of Israel invented to describe Russians that the state imported in the early 90s who turned out to be Russians, have nothing to do with Jewish identity, But the category of others is also similar to the category of Jewish nationals under Israeli control. So we have a reality when the Israeli government is in control of the entire geography, and if you live in that geography and you were born to a Palestinian family, your rights are denied from birth to death. And if you are born to a Jewish family, your rights are granted from birth to death. And it doesn't matter if you are proud of it or you are ashamed of it, if you love it, you hate it, you fight it, you submit to it. Your actual individual and sometimes collective behavior is irrelevant to how the law is enforced on everybody. Now, how did we get here? Here's the issue. When you try to look at the issue of Palestine to study it, there are thousands upon thousands of stories. There are millions of narratives on this place. And it's really a wonder, Now, how come such a small place has so much presence in global media? You know how big Palestine is? 27,009 square kilometers. In American, that's about 18 square miles, 18,000 square miles. I can say American, right?
Yeah, sure.
I hope you guys change the system soon. It's actually 1/10 of the size of New Mexico, Yet we are much more present in global media than New Mexico, right? And that presence in media does not do us a service. It actually serves further confusing people about the reality that's happening now. So when you look at all the narratives around, they can actually be reduced to two narratives. One is based on belief. And with narratives that are based on belief, you can debate them, you can argue about them, you can be emotional around them. And it's like it's okay to not come to the same belief because people have different beliefs. But the important thing about narratives based on belief is that you can't prove them and you can't disprove them. Like, for example, how many of us in the room believe in God? Musab, can you prove it?
It's not.
No, you can't prove it. Can you disprove it?
No, it's difficult to disprove something.
So you can't prove it, you can't disprove it. How many of us don't believe in God? Can you prove it?
I just don't.
Can you disagree? Yeah, exactly. Why don't you almost fight?
Why don't I? I used
Because you have opposite beliefs.
things change.
Things change.
This made me change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the narratives based on belief cannot be approved, cannot be disproved. They're just interesting. And the narratives that are rooted in belief when it comes to Palestine sound like this. 6,000 years ago, God created heaven, created Adam and Eve. Eve gave Adam the fruit, and somehow God gave this land to the Jewish people. With a few things that happened in between. You're laughing, you're learning. But the one narrative that you're laughing about is the most popular narrative on the planet today. It actually makes adults come to me and say, like, we've been there 4,000 years ago, and it's like, you look good. But like adults, people with all that kind of confidence come to you and tell you that your family's property, your family's inheritance was given to them by God 4,000 years ago, and they were not even born, they were not even an idea yet. And so it's very confusing when they use American accent to say that. Yet that is still the most popular narrative, and it's always debated. It's always in the media. You always bring people who will interact with a narrative like this. The other narrative that can be traced easily and is more relevant to where we have been, at least for my 45 years on this planet, and for much more years before. That narrative sounds like this. Back in 1897, in a city called Basel in Switzerland, about 202 Jewish nationalists met over a period of 2 days. And in that meeting, they decided that they want to turn Palestine into a Jewish-only space, or a Jewish homeland, as they called it. Now, those people did not view themselves as arrogant, racist, colonizers, evil, vicious, or any of those things. Why is that? Because to have people leaving Europe to go somewhere else in the world to colonize it was a social, political, and economic norm. It was normalized to have people leaving Europe to go and exploit, destroy, and occupy other people's homelands. That process was called colonialism, right? And the founders of the State of Israel in Palestine also were part. They had a department called the Department of Colonizing Palestine, or something like that. Many people actually think this poster was made by Palestinians. It wasn't. It was printed and promoted and designed by the Tourism Development Department of the Jewish Agency back in 1932. And not to encourage back people to come and visit Palestine like many of the people in the room did, but to come and visit in order to colonize Palestine and turn it into a Jewish-only space. Now, if you want to colonize Palestine, you don't have to invent the outline. The outline was invented by criminals before you. All what you need to do is follow the outline. How was that outline followed everywhere? You leave Europe, you go somewhere else, you recognize the existing, indigenous population to be a problem. How do you resolve that problem? In the case of this continent, the problem was resolved through genocide. Thankfully, not 100% genocide, but maybe 98% of the indigenous population were eliminated. Same case in Brazil, In almost every place out of Europe where people are forced to speak a European language. Believe it or not, we speak English here, and English is a European language. And then those who speak English hate those who speak Spanish, even though Spanish is another European language. But those things are real things, and not only here, but almost in every place outside of Europe where people speak European languages. So the first thing you do, you eliminate the indigenous population. The second way, which was the British way, you look at human beings as human resources. When you look at human beings as human resources, you set them up for exploitation. So you exploit the human resources in order to extract natural resources. The biggest example of that is the British in India, where Indian people were exploited to extract resources from India for the benefits of the British Empire. This is how we ended up with English tea. There's no tea plantations in England, yet we have English tea. We have Italian coffee. We have Belgian chocolate. We have Israeli hummus. All of those things come from the exact same place. So if you want to establish your own state somewhere else, you view the indigenous population to be a problem, you either exploit them or eliminate them, or in many cases in Central Europe and in the northern frontier of India, you subject the population to removal. Forced population transfer, elimination. You are removed from that territory simply because you were born. What's been happening in the land of Palestine, practically, in theory since 1917, and effectively and practically since 1919, not 1 month has passed without witnessing the removal and forced displacement of a Palestinian individual, Palestinian family, village, town, or a city. Not 1 month passed, because the indigenous population in Palestine have been viewed as a problem. And there's a lot of literature that have been made by the founders of the State of Israel and their predecessors, looking at the Palestinian population to be a nobody or to be a problem that needs to be removed. They call that policy the policy of transfer. When you look at those pictures were taken in March in April of 1948 of the largest Palestinian city at the time, which was the city of Jaffa, 3,500 years old town, had a population of 73,000 members of Palestinian families. It was bombed and attacked day in, day out for a few weeks, and the population was reduced from 73,000 people to less than 100 people. If you color those pictures, it feels like you are looking at pictures taken from the city of Gaza yesterday. Why Gaza? It's the current largest Palestinian city in Palestine. Which means we are dealing with the exact same ideology, the exact same way of thinking, the exact same brutality, the exact same destruction, the exact same things. The only difference is technology. Back then when they would bomb a house, maybe 6 people will die. Today when they bomb, a shelter, they can murder up to 60 people. That's the difference, technology. In the year 1967, over a period of 6 days, only in the occupied West Bank here, we had nearly 400,000 people that were displaced. Today, the State of Israel has 9 different policies if any of those policies were implemented, the result is a Palestinian individual, Palestinian family, Palestinian village, town, or a city will be displaced. 9 policies. State violence is only one of those 9 policies. Now, the difference between forced population transfer in Palestine and forced population transfer elsewhere is that in Palestine, we're told that Palestine is a land without people. So we're transferring nobodies, you know? Or you hear the thing like there's no such thing as Palestinians, or Palestinian people are a made-up nation, or whatever, you know? But why is there insistence on denying the existence of the Palestinian people? We're aware of our existence, you know? But why does our oppressor insist that we don't exist? Because if you eliminate the victim of your crime, you eliminate the crime. That's it. It's not about us. It's about legalizing and justifying Israeli criminal behavior towards Palestinians. When you say Palestine is a land without people, believe that, it's okay. You will only need to believe to also eliminate nearly 10,000 years of human history on the land of Palestine since the time of the city of Jericho. Or 6,000 years of human history continue the human existence in the city of Hebron. Or 4,000 years of human history in Bethlehem, and you go on and on and on. So like, believing that, you know, Palestine was once a land without people is very popular among supporters, defenders, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior. Believe that and you'll sound stupid. Not because I say so, it's because it's stupid to deny 9,900 years of human history on the land of Palestine. So if you want to establish Jewish homeland on the land of Palestine, you have to eliminate the indigenous Palestinian population. The second thing, you want, establish your own homeland. Land becomes important. And not land in its indigenous sentimental value. Because in the indigenous life, land is not a thing. Land is your ancestors, right? It has that living aspect to it. Usually colonizers don't understand that because they are after resources. So they are after the land because the land contains the resources. Now here's the thing. We as Palestinians, we are a very diverse society in terms of skin color, faith, accents, language sometimes. It's very, very difficult to put us in one racial box or one religious box because we are diverse. Yet with all this diversity, we have one thing in common. I can tell you that I and every single Palestinian in this room share one thing in common before even having to meet them. We're all born to families that were robbed partially or completely of our inheritance, land, and property. Who does that robbery? It's the state of Israel. How does the state of Israel rob Palestinians of their property and inheritance? They don't steal it and run away with it. They just make it unsafe for you to be on your family's land. You're present on land stolen by the Israeli government from your family, they will kill you, they will deport you, or arrest you. You're not allowed to be safe at your family's property. Robbing Palestinian families of their land is an ongoing process, and it will only stop when it reaches 100%. Okay? There is something very strange about the state of Israel when it comes to land robbery. The state of Israel was ruled by an ideology, right? The ideology is called Zionism. If you don't know now, you know. Now, Zionism is an ideology that is a secular ideology. It turns Jewish identity into a genetic marker, which makes no sense. But to them, it makes sense. And they are best described, when it comes to land, best described by a Jewish Israeli historian called Evan Pape, who said that Zionists are people who do not believe in God, but nevertheless believe God gave them Palestine. So the only reason we bring God into the picture is to exploit his mighty and in order to justify land robbery. You know, it's very weird because Jewish prophets told us that we should not steal, right? But the only reason God is brought to the picture by supporters, defenders, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior is to exploit God in order to justify criminal behavior. And that was not done by Israelis alone. Every single religion have been exploited and abused to justify criminal behavior. I've witnessed Buddhism being exploited, Islamic faith, Christian faith, Jewish faith, Hindu way of life. So every religion can be abused to justify criminal behavior. The third process that we have in Palestine, if you want to establish Jewish homeland in Palestine, you have to remove the Palestinian population, you have to rob the Palestinian families of their land and property, and the last thing, you need manpower. You need people who you identify with. You know, in the case of the State of Israel, they made Palestine open for permanent residency of every single person that was born to a Jewish family on the planet. Wrong. Not every Jewish person is welcome. You know, the so-called Jewish state does not have a definition for who's Jewish and who's not. And the reason for that is because they can be selective. If you are born to a Jewish family and you believe in equality, and you examine Israel's criminal behavior towards Palestinians through your understanding of Jewish faith, and see how the State of Israel violates Jewish faith and its criminal behavior towards Palestinians, then you are the wrong kind of a Jew. They do not want you there. You know, I have many Jewish friends who are denied access by the State of Israel. You know, why? Because they believe in equality and they believe that Palestinian people are being dispossessed and oppressed and subject to criminal behavior. Who is welcome? You're a Jewish person who does not mind the brutalization of the Palestinian people, who is willing to benefit from Israeli privileges, who want to support Israeli criminal behavior. So if you're willing to support it, defend it, and benefit from it, you're welcome. If you question it, you are not. So the reason the State of Israel does not have a definition for who's Jewish and who's not is simply because they want to remain selective on who's allowed and who's not. Okay? So if you want to establish Jewish homeland in the land of Palestine, you have to remove the Palestinian population. You have to rob Palestinian families of their property and inheritance, and you have to replace them with a selected kind of Jewish individuals. That is the context of what's happening in Palestine. If you are born to a Palestinian family, you're on the oppressed side of this process. If you are born to a Jewish family, you are on the privileged side of this process. The rest is a distraction. So the reason many people think, or made to believe, that Palestine is somehow complicated or confusing issue is because they are always invited to look at it out of context. I'll give you an example. Have you heard of the term settlement or colony or Jewish-only community?
Yes.
Yeah. Settlements, colonies, or Jewish-only communities, name them whatever you want, are nearly 193 towns that look like this. Swiss cottages implanted by the Israeli government on Palestinian hilltops throughout the West Bank. There's nearly 800,000 Jewish Israeli beneficiaries of that process. Okay? What we are looking at is the southern part of Bethlehem. And every Swiss cottage you see on this hill is part of an Israeli colony called Ephrata. Ephrata is a Hebrew word that means a fertile, and it's a reference to the town of Bethlehem. So this is biblical Ephrata. King David was born in Ephrata. Now for the Israeli government, King David was not born in Bethlehem. King David was born in a settlement the State of Israel established back in 1982. You know? But anyways, they go on eliminating the legacy of Palestinian communities and creating revival. You can't revive a living being, you know? Well, first you kill it, and then you revive it the way you like. What's happening with settlements? In every single housing unit you see, the Israeli government succeeded in removing the Palestinians of their land. The Israeli government stole the land. The Israeli government built homes on that land and brought in Jewish beneficiaries. In every single one of those households, you have the three processes: removal of the Palestinians, robbing them of their land, and replacing them. Right? So while everybody is invited to debate Israeli settlements and whether they are legal or illegal, the Israeli government was on the land, dispossessing Palestinians, removing them, and replacing them. You know? So in the end of the day, like, if you look at Palestine out of the context, it will be very difficult to understand what's happening there. In the same way, it's very difficult for me to understand this. It's not working. Does that seem complicated? If you are born to a Palestinian family, you are a victim of this process. If you are born to a Jewish family, you are a beneficiary of this process. Does that seem complicated?
No.
How can I make it complicated? Because I will.
Tell lies.
Sorry?
Tell lies.
You tell lies all along, my dear. You know, who said lies? Okay, thank you. I want you to know, just an extra thing from this lecture. I was not supposed to speak about that. I want you to know that Israelis lie intentionally.
Oh.
Yeah, because they want to distract you also by trying to debunk the lies. And once the lies are debunked, your findings are irrelevant. You know? We heard of a Palestinian journalist called Shireen Abu Akleh. She's Palestinian American. The Israelis know this soldier who took a knee, aimed at her neck, shot a bullet that ripped her head apart, you know? And what did they say? Oh, she was killed in a Palestinian crossfire. They know the name of the criminal. But then everybody who spent like months trying to prove the Israeli story was a lie. By the time it was proven, Shireen was dead, buried, it was completely over. So you should know that supporters, defenders, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior, they lie intentionally to distract you from the context, to distract you from the process. So every time you find yourself trying to debunk an Israeli lie, just stop yourself, you know? So how can I make it more complicated? Do you know the state of Israel does not have a constitution, right?
Yes.
If you don't know now, you know. A constitution is a legal system. You know why they don't have a constitution? Because why to have one constitution when you can have 5? The state of Israel upholds and operates 5 separate different legal systems on the land of Palestine. One of those legal systems concerning those who are born to Jewish families. If you were born to a Jewish family and you live anywhere on the land of Palestine, you know, you're subject to one set of rules. If you are born to a Palestinian family, you are subject to one of 4 separate, different Israeli legal systems. And that's how they complicate the issues. So for example, the Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, it's a group of Palestinians that is subject to Israeli civil discrimination. Because Israeli discrimination has a civil part and has a military part. So civil discrimination is something like what Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine are subject to. Those are the so-called Israeli Arabs. 70,000 militants went into a quest to eliminate the Palestinian population from 78% of Palestine. Those are the Jewish militias, or the Jewish gangs, or the Zionist gangs, or It's all the people who later on became known as the Israeli Defense Force. They worked on removing nearly 750,000 Palestinians, and from October of 1949 up until today, none of those Palestinians were ever allowed back. Okay? 15% survived. Those people were subject to Israeli military rule. It lasted until 1966, and then the State of Israel decided to abolish that military rule. When America was abolishing Jim Crow laws, the State of Israel were inventing them, because there are 65 different civil laws implemented by the State of Israel upon the so-called Israeli Arabs that maintain primitive status for those who were born to Palestinian families compared to those who were born to Jewish families. Now, those 65 laws can be discriminatory in language and practice, or beautiful in language, discriminatory in practice. Like, for example, I'm finding it difficult with this technology. Okay. When you're talking about urban planning laws, every city on the planet grows on the level of 1 to 3% of its actual size every year, right? And that has to go in accordance with the laws of urban planning. You read the laws of urban planning in the State of Israel, they are beautiful, right? And then when you examine them, you look at a city like Nazareth. You know Nazareth, right? Who doesn't know Nazareth? A man, a woman, and a donkey. You know that story. The city of Nazareth is about 3,000 years old down. Back in 1954, the urban size of Nazareth was 14 square kilometers. The urban size of the city of Nazareth today is 14 square kilometers. All the population growth that had been happening in that city was still going on with the exact same urban size as it was in 1954. Next to the city of Nazareth, the Israelis established a Jewish-only community, and they called it Upper Nazareth for upper people. Upper Nazareth did not exist in 1954. Today it's about 34 or 36 square kilometers altogether. So the urban planning laws allow the expansion and creation of Jewish-only communities, but freeze the urban existence of Palestinian communities. A law that is beautiful in language, racist in practice. The laws that are racist both in language and practice are plenty, but one of them is the Israeli election laws. Arabs in Israel are allowed to vote. So Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's like, the State of Israel cannot be a democracy simply because it's not ruled by the will of the people. It's ruled by an ideology. And I find it very difficult. Some people find it very difficult to understand that. So the Israeli election law, it has one really very important line in it, and it says the following: no party is allowed to run for elections if they negate the Zionist Jewish identity of the regime. So you, as a non-Zionist, non-Jewish person, you are invited to participate in the voting activity, but the outcome of voting activities will never be representative of you. Why? Because we need to maintain inequality between Jewish people and non-Jewish people. Many people say there's no equality in the State of Israel. It's not there's no equality. Equality in the State of Israel is illegal. It's against Israeli election law. And many people think Palestinians have to unite, then have vote power, and go to elect somebody who will grant them equality. No party that has a equality platform is allowed to run in the elections to begin with. I'll give you a different example. Not if Palestinians vote. What if 100% of Jewish Israelis wake up tomorrow and realize that we brought nothing but oppression, apartheid, genocide on the Palestinian people, and we want to vote for a party that will work on fixing that, correcting that. We want to vote for a party that will grant equality. Not one Jewish person will be allowed to find a party to vote for. Because equality in the state of Israel is illegal. That's only one of the four systems. The second system is applied upon Palestinians who live within the Israeli boundaries of Jerusalem. So if you were born to a Jewish family and you live within those black boundaries, you are treated the same way as a Jewish person living in Upper Nazareth. If you were born to a Palestinian family, you are not mistreated the same way as a Palestinian in Nazareth. You're a cool permanent resident of Jerusalem. That's your legal status. There is nothing permanent about you or the other 450,000 Palestinians who are viewed the same way by the Israeli government. You're called permanent resident, even though the regulations of the state work on squeezing you out of the city. You know, like home demolitions is a practice carried out by the Israeli government there. The same government that puts resources to build a house for you as a person born to a Jewish family sends a bulldozer to destroy your house as a Palestinian. Why do they do that? Because Palestinians build illegally. Right? Why do we build illegally in Jerusalem?
Because they can't get permission to add on to a house
They
legally.
can't, or they are not allowed.
Then
No, we can't. I can get a permit. It's just a piece of paper. I can't carry paper. I'm not allowed. Like I emphasize on this because many women in this country, up until 1965, were told to believe that they can't vote. Imagine you are told that you can't hold a piece of paper, mark it, and put it in that you're disabled. No. When you say you can't, it's your fault. When you say you are not allowed, you put it back on the shoulders of the system that denies you your freedom. So you're not allowed. The state of Israel approves 1 to 2% of Palestinian requests to build homes on their land in Jerusalem. Denies 98%. So a Palestinian in Jerusalem builds illegally because he's not included in the law. Also, if a Palestinian lived outside those boundaries for longer than 3 years, then the state of Israel will revoke their permanent residency. So it means you will never be allowed to visit your family's homes within those boundaries. This is why people in Jerusalem are stuck. They can't live and they can't leave. The third set of rules is the most complicated of the four. And it's a military it's a military rule. The Israeli military rule is applied on 5,500 square kilometers of the land of Palestine. It's a territory you know as the West Bank of the River Jordan. 5,500 square kilometers, home to nearly 3.3 million Palestinians. The Palestinians who live there are under Israeli military rule. The Israeli settlers who live within the same territory are under Israeli civil rule. The Israeli military rule is made of more than 1,600 military orders. If you break any of them at the age of 14, you'll be arrested. You'll be sent to a military court. You'll be sentenced by a military judge, and you'll be thrown in jail. That process was carried out more than 1 million times in Israeli military courts. Now, a person who's born to a Jewish family and lives in the occupied West Bank is subject to the Israeli civil rule. In Israeli civil rule, at the age of 14, you are a minor. 16, you are a minor. 18, you become adult. A Palestinian is viewed as an adult at the age of 14. And that's just practice. Many defenders of Israeli criminal behavior say that Israel does not hold children because they don't view a 14 years old to be a child to begin with. Okay? Now, In the occupied West Bank, the state of Israel have worked on increasing Jewish Israeli population in the occupied West Bank from 0 in 1967 to nearly 1 million now. They have stolen property from Palestinians under the pretext of closed military zones. Nearly 1/3 of the property of the residents of the West Bank is stolen by the Israeli army under the pretext of closed military zones. The Israeli army uses that property for 1 day every 3 months on average, and they deny Palestinian families access to that land every single day of the year. So we use military justifications to rob families of their land. On this side of the border is civil law, on this side of the border is military law, but essentially it's the same process. It's robbing Palestinian families of their inheritance, property, and land. There is a confusing reality in the occupied West Bank. We have an 87-year-old man who lives in the city of Ramallah over here, and he believes he's the president of Palestine. We have a Palestinian president, we have Palestinian government, we have Palestinian police. We're talking about the Palestinian Authority, right? And that's what I'm talking about. How did we come to having a Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza? In the year 1993, the head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and head of the Israeli government at the time shook hands in the White House, and they decided to go into a two-state solution, another peace process. So the head of PLO would recognize the legitimacy of the state of Israel on 78% of the land of Palestine. In return, the Israeli government will allow the creation of a Palestinian state and the land they occupied in the West Bank and Gaza. Simple, right? So Palestinians do not know how to rule themselves. Imagine being told after existing on the shoulders of nearly 27 different civilizations in the past 6,000 years alone. You've accumulated that experience of self-rule, but we need to prove ourselves to the United States, the EU, and to our oppressor. So a step-by-step resolution means that the Israeli army will first redeploy their forces from within the city centers to around the city centers, the blue areas on the map. And their authority will become a Palestinian authority that will provide civil services as well as police control to the residents who live in those cities. Palestinian police does whatever police does in any community except for one thing: provide protection to Palestinian civilians from the Israeli army. Who's there to protect us from the Israeli army? It's the Israeli army. The orange areas on the map are called areas B. So the blue is area A, the orange is area B. Areas B are Palestinian towns and villages away from the city centers. The Palestinian Authority provides civil services to the residents of areas B, but the policing control is in the hands of the Israeli army. If you add the orange and the blue together, they make up 38% of the occupied West Bank. The rest of the area is called Area C, and is under direct control of the Israeli government, from civil control to military control to police control. Why did Palestinians agree to this? Because they were told that areas A, B, and C will become the state of Palestine by the year 1999. But the Israeli government begged to defer, and they missed on 1999. Right now, we live in this reality. 3.3 million Palestinians, up to 98% of them. We live in 130 plus separate areas throughout the West Bank. The space between us is dominated by Israeli infrastructure, like a 700 kilometers long wall, like 1,200 miles of Israeli highways connecting Jewish-only communities together with the State of Israel, and with more than 700 military checkpoints. So we don't actually live in the same place. We live in separate spaces. Give you an example. If our president was to come from Ramallah to Bethlehem, he has to come on Israeli-controlled roads. There are Israeli checkpoints on those roads. It's down to the Israeli soldier on the checkpoint to allow our president to pass or not to pass, which means any Israeli soldier has superior authority to the authority of the president of Palestine in Palestine. But we have a president, we have a government, we have elections. All of this is happening under the boots of Israeli soldiers, under the boots of the Israeli government. Okay? The fourth set of rules is the worst and the bloodiest, and that's for a reason. Up until the year 1949, the founders of the State of Israel expelled residents from 240 Palestinian communities into the shore. The Egyptian kingdom at the time prevented Palestinian survivors from escaping further into Egypt. The State of Israel prevented those people from going back home. In the year 1967, instead of allowing those families back, the State of Israel followed them and subjected them to an Israeli military rule. Now, what happens when you're ruled by the exact same regime that has robbed you and your family of everything? Submission? No. Rejection. What happens when you reject Israeli criminal behavior, when you reject Israeli control? Israel will kill you. Gaza has been subject to Israeli atrocities from 1949 up until today. And what has been happening is atrocity after atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. What you're looking at for the past 465 days is like living the past 76 days in one go. You know? Before 2005, Palestinians in Gaza were subject to Israeli military rule. After 2005, the Israeli government decided to make it worse. They called it the disengagement plan. What's the disengagement plan? We redeploy our forces from within Gaza to around Gaza. We redistribute the settlers who live in Gaza to settlements in the occupied West Bank. And then this move was promoted, and then we declare Gaza as a hostile entity. And we promote that as we left Gaza. Something never happened. When you hear the Israeli Minister of Defense coming around saying, like, there will be no water, no electricity, no food, no medicine, no. Where do you think he gets that confidence from? He gets that confidence from the fact that the State of Israel has been in control of all of that. In the year 2005, the Israeli government that implemented this savage plan had a legal advisor called Dov Glass, who said that the point is not to make the Arabs who live in Gaza die of hunger. The point is to put them on a diet. Now, he's a lawyer. He has nothing to do with nutrition. What does he mean by a diet? In 2009, we found out that Israeli officials were calculating food into Gaza would be allowed based on calorie counts. They contaminated more than 97% of the water in Gaza. 1/3 of the population was already their homes were destroyed. And if you know anything about us or our means of survival, when the Israeli destroys your house, you're broken for a week, and then you start rebuilding it. We have Palestinian community, not very far from Gaza, but on this side of the border, called Al-Araqib. It was destroyed more than 214 times until October of last year, which means it was rebuilt 215 times. When Israel destroys your home, you go on and rebuild it. You know? The submission to destruction is not an option. Yes, we had nearly a quarter of the Palestinian population locked up in Gaza being homeless. Why? Because the State of Israel bombed your house and the State of Israel prevented you from rebuilding your house. The atrocities that we see are atrocities that are being committed against the population that have been subject to a merciless siege for nearly 17 years. Then what happened? The state of Israel found a chance to commit another genocide. The Israeli Prime Minister actually said it once that removal, that in Palestine they had a problem and there are 2 million Palestinians living there. He was talking about that in relation to the West Bank, not in relation to Gaza. The problem in the West Bank, there are 2 million Palestinians living there. I can't remove them because it's impractical and unethical. I did not know that the removal is impractical, but genocide has been practical for 465 days. I have nothing to say about the savagery of every single Israeli adult that walked the land of Gaza in the past 465 days. Or the pilots who have thrown 85,000 or more than 85,000 tons of bombs, which is the equivalent of, I don't know, 12? The equivalent of how many nuclear powers have been, bombs, close to 6 nuclear bombs that have been thrown on that population. But yeah, each one of those 4 forms is savage in a way, but Gaza is very important to put everybody to force everybody into submission. Because if you don't submit to the savagery of the state of Israel, we'll do to you what we have been doing to Gaza. Israeli ministers have been saying certain places in the occupied West Bank need to look like Gaza. Well, they are already. They are already mini Gazas throughout the occupied West Bank. Any one of those communities can be locked down in no more than 10 minutes and will be sealed off from the rest of the world. The 4 systems that the State of Israel have been creating and maintaining on the land of Palestine maintain this reality. Maintain the domination of those who were born to Jewish families over those who were born to Palestinian families. And its control over Palestine and the Palestinian people. The State of Israel got away with committing the crime of ethnic cleansing. It's getting away for the 2nd time with the crime of genocide. And then the 3rd crime against humanity, and then that's the book of crimes in international law. 3rd crime is called the crime of apartheid. The crime of apartheid is a crime that takes place when the regime in control creates a system of domination of one group of people over the other for the reason of race, ethnicity, faith, or language. The State of Israel takes the element of faith, weaponizes it, turns it into a genetic marker, and uses it as the cornerstone of its apartheid regimes. When defenders, supporters, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior go around saying Israel does not have an apartheid regime, they're 100% correct. But the State of Israel does not have one apartheid regime. The State of Israel have created and have been maintaining 4 separate different apartheid regimes on the land of Palestine. How do they do it? How can they do it logistically? Because obviously they are ethically bankrupt. The State of Israel controls every inch of the land of Palestine. When you control every inch of the land of Palestine, you can separate Palestinians from each other. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are not allowed freedom of access to Palestinians in Gaza, Jerusalem, or Nazareth. Palestinians in Gaza are not allowed freedom of access to Palestinians in Jerusalem, the West Bank, or Nazareth. Palestinians in Jerusalem and Nazareth, they are allowed access to one another. Minimum access to the occupied West Bank, no access to Palestinians in Gaza. So when you control every inch of the land, you control the movement of the people, you keep them separated from one another. The other thing, how do they know which law is applied? and 4 of us are driving and we hit a checkpoint, the Israeli soldier will know which law is applied on each and every one of us separately. How do they know? Sorry? License plate? We have 2 license plates, so not 4. You need 4 labels.
Identity cards?
Sorry?
Do they have identity cards?
Yes, but I'm telling you it's a matter of birth. So your ID card is given to you at the age of 16, and you have to have it on you at all times, like your skin color. The day you don't have your ID card, you will be arrested and punished for not having your skin color on you or your ID card on you. It's a matter of birth. The state of Israel controls birth registrations. The moment you are born, you have to end up in an Israeli birth registration system, and from that way onwards, they decide which system will be applied on you from the day you are born until the day you die. The day I was born, the state of Israel decided that I was born in Bethlehem, therefore I'm a Muslim and I am subject to Israeli military rule. That's genius. You know, the day Musab was born, right? They decided that the regulations imposed on Palestinians in Gaza had to be imposed on him. The same if you were born in Jerusalem, the same if you were born in Nazareth. That's how they do it. And the point of it is just to make it very complicated to understand. But finally, if you are born to a Palestinian family, you are subject to one of those brutal regimes. If you are born to a Jewish family, you are a beneficiary of those brutal regimes. What you do in between is irrelevant. You can love it, you can hate it, you can fight against it, you can submit to it, you can go angry. None of the things you do as a survivor matter. So I'll just stop here and hope you guys have more questions, because if you don't have questions, I'll keep talking.
Thank you. It's hard to change gears there. We will have a question and answer period now, and hopefully a conversation here. Do we want to put the lights on? Yeah, let's.
It's more cozy this way.
It is cozy. And right before we start taking questions, I'm going to ask Lee to come up and and say a few things. And we're going to pass a basket for donations as we're doing question and answer.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I guess the piece that's now missing from the Palestine story is us. And I guess we all in this room know that we uphold all of that apartheid with our tax dollars. And I think it's so important that we continue in all the different ways we can to make it known that we do not accept that. It is unspeakable that our government supports any government that does that. And I'm not gonna go into it. Maybe at some point we can have some workshops about things we can do. But I think it's really, really important that everyone in this room figure out what it is they can do and what it is that, within your comfort zone, and do it, because this has got to stop. So I just wanted to say that. We are passing the basket. I want people to dig deep and help Baha and Baha's work and Baha's tour. If you want to make a larger donation, you can talk to me. You can go onto the Syracuse website and do it with just put a memo using our donate button. And I really thank you, Baha, for coming. It's been amazing. I can't wait to go to Palestine. And I also want to say that there's a couple things going on Sunday between 3 and 6 at the SBC offices, which are at 2013 East Tennessee Street. We're going to do an art build to get ready for the march on the 20th, which will be leaving from the federal building after some speeches at noon. And the last thing I wanted to say was that some of us will be gathering about 15, 20 minutes before that march starts at noon on Monday at the corner of Water and South Clinton to form a bit of a Palestinian contingent to march in that march. So if anyone wants to join us, be on that corner, bring your flag, bring your sign. It'll be nice to have everybody all together. So please join us. And thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for being so patient throughout both of these nights. And is that a question about the march?
Yeah, what corner was that again?
What corner? I picked the corner of Water and South Clinton. So it's the block that the federal building's in. It's just a little bit away from where we usually stand. So I figured that we could gather there and then, walk 20 yards over to the rally. Okay, thanks you. And who do I pass it back to you?
I'll pass it around.
Thanks, Lee. Yes.
I'll go for the first question simply because I have the mic. The question is usually about like solutions, right? There's one thing that people usually forget, which is the solution of any problem is based on your understanding of the problem itself. In the land of Palestine, there are two problems. There is Israel's problem and there are the Palestinians' problem. Israel's problem is the very existence of the Palestinian people. They also call it the demographic problem or the demographic threat. Every Palestinian, the day he's born or she's born, represent a so-called demographic problem to the state of Israel. So how does the state of Israel resolve its problem? It resolves its problem through ethnic cleansing, through genocide, through apartheid. What's the Palestinians' problem?
Israel.
Oppression. What's the solution for oppression? It's the end of oppression. You don't really need to be a genius. You not knowing how end of oppression looks like means you don't know how end of oppression looks like. It doesn't mean if you don't see it, it doesn't mean it should not happen. You just don't see it. How can we get to an end of Israeli oppression of the land of Palestine? I don't know. How to never get to an end of Israeli oppression of the land of Palestine? That's I know. We have a very sick norm in global politics today, Western politics, where we have governments that provide Israeli oppressors with diplomatic, economic, and military support, and at the same time recognize Palestinians, or recognize that Palestinians need humanitarian aid. Those governments support both sides of the same oppression. What's the outcome of supporting both sides of the same oppression? Maintaining oppression. That's it. So the reason we can never have end of oppression on the land of Palestine is because we have sick governments around the world who have been continuously normalizing support of the oppressor and survival of the oppressed. No situation of oppression can ever come to an end if you support the oppressed and the oppressor. And that's the sick norm we are normalizing today. So another thing, there are governments who have diplomatic relations with the state of Israel who say, we don't support the state of Israel in this genocide. No, we support the state of Israel despite of genocide. You know, how about that as a more sick reality? You know, like there are many white supremacist and racist people in Europe who've been like saying things like, Israeli war criminal deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. You know, like the head of the largest party in the Netherlands, and there was another idiot somewhere else. You know, but those white supremacists and fascists support the state of Israel because of its oppression over the Palestinians. Just clear. But the more disgusting stand is to support the state of Israel despite of its oppression of the Palestinian people, because in that case, like the savagery we are subject to does not mean anything. You know? So the reason we cannot get to end of oppression on the land of Palestine is because of that dual support. Now, you guys should take a backseat, because the United States of America is not going to be the first country to give up on Israel's savagery, and justice for Palestine is not coming from here. This entity have always been on the forefront of war, not justice, you know? But they will follow. So this entity has been also one of the last 5 governments to give up on apartheid South Africa. You know, so guys, take a back seat and just try to understand reality the way it is. I'm not saying take a back seat and be submissive. No. Existence of oppression is not an invitation for submission or depression or crying over it by yourself. No. Oppression is an invitation for rejection. You see oppression, you reject it. How you express your rejection? We got answers in our indigenous wisdom. And I'm sure there is answers in indigenous wisdom here. But look for them, you know? In our indigenous wisdom, we say, when you see wrongdoings, we reject them with our hands. But if we can't, then with our words. And if we can't, then with our heart. So we need to always practice rejection of oppression and wrongdoings. Submission to them is not an option. So take a back seat, be comfortable, keep learning, and keep expressing your rejection to the savagery and brutality of Israeli criminal regimes in Palestine. So that's the answer to the solution. Thank you.
I think we can do this in some.
Could you say a few words, background history? There's a two-state solution was going to be announced, I think, in 1947 by Count Bernadette in Jerusalem. And the Menachem Begin role in that, you're either a prime minister or you're a terrorist, but at one time he was a terrorist when Count Bernadette was killed. And then talk about, I think it was 390 villages in Galilee that were taken down stone by stone, and no one even knows that history of how those people were made invisible. So you can give us a little more history on those two things.
We're not made invisible, we're just not being reported on.
Yeah.
Now we are reporting on ourselves.
Invisible, right?
Thanks for bringing the two-state solution thingy, because the two-state solution is a solution for a problem that is irrelevant. The first proposal for a two-state solution was in 1917. You know it as the Balfour Declaration. Second proposal was in the 30s. You know it as the White Papers. Then we have the Peel Plan. Then we have this thing that the United Nations voted on, and Palestinians were told, yeah, Palestinians rejected it. And how can you reject a vote something that you were not invited to vote on? You know?
You are the country, you are the states, you can't.
Yeah, so it's all those countries are responsible for it, but none of them is Palestine, if you look at the list. And then the reality in Palestine was a three-state solution, if you like that language of solutions. 78% of Palestine was ruled by the Israeli government, nearly 20% ruled by the Jordanian government, and then 2% ruled by the Egyptian government. 1967, that came back again to one-state solution, which is the Israeli government. So we have a one-state reality. Now, the difference between all the 2-3 state solutions that happened before and the one in 1993 is that in 1993 the State of Israel had Palestinian approval. That's the only difference. But that didn't work because in the year 2000, the Israeli government offered Palestinians a very generous offer. This is the amount of the offer. In the year 2000, the last Israeli labor government, so it was led by a social nationalist called Ehud Barak, offered Palestinians this: orange is Palestine, white, including the roads, is Israel, and this gray color is Palestine, but Palestinians have to rent it to Israel. When Palestinians rejected this, they were called crocodiles. 17 years later, an orange man came with the exact same map. This is what Trump, offered as his peace to prosperity proposal. It's actually the same map. But Trump used a stupider graphic designer, and that's it. So when we're talking about two-state solutions, there are a lot of proposals for two-state solution, and the reason we keep talking about two-state solution is because it doesn't work. It's not because it works. We keep using it as a fig leaf for politicians who can look. We know the reality is bad, but we adhere to a two-state solution, to a negotiated one. It's just like a fig leaf for politicians. It's not to resolve any issue on the land of Palestine. Palestinian struggle is not a struggle for statehood. Self-determination is important. But when you rob a family of their property, they don't care which state is robbing them of their property. When the federal government comes to your property, you don't care if it was ruled by a Republican or a Democrat. You're not allowed to steal my property. So it's a struggle for equal rights, for freedom, and for equality, right? What's the precondition for freedom? We keep talking about preconditions for peace. What's the precondition for freedom? Thank you, Mary. Everyone is born free and equal. Palestinians have fulfilled their precondition for freedom the moment they were born individually. We don't need to do anything more in order to achieve our right to freedom. Between birth and death, we need to struggle against the power that denies us our right to freedom and equality. When we talk about the likes of Volker Bernadotte, Volker Bernadotte is a Swedish Second World War hero. He's well known for the white buses, working on saving a lot of Jewish survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. He came on Palestine on a fact-finding mission. He was assassinated by people that ended up visiting Sweden as prime minister of the Israeli government. So when we talk about the murder of Volker Bernadotte, Israeli criminals murdered a lot of people. They even murdered American soldiers on USS Liberty in 1967. But that's not about Israeli criminals, because a criminal can keep proving his criminal behavior. But it's about the Swedish government that would accept the criminals that murdered such a Second World War hero, to the criminals to be allowed into the Kingdom of Sweden. The criminals who bombed, USS Liberty being allowed on the soil of the United States of America. That tells more about where those murdered people, come from, and the governments in control of their homeland and their relations with the State of Israel. Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, yes, she's Palestinian American. Allowing Israeli criminals to get away with her murder from a Palestinian point of view, yes, we continue to be murdered by Israeli criminals. And there is no court that will accept us. But then the American government just threw her under the bus. Well, she's not one of us. Every single American person that's murdered by Israeli criminals is thrown under the bus. Not only soldiers from 1967. Rachel Corrie is one. Yeah. So yeah, questions?
So feminist scholars describe Palestine as the largest prison in the world. And the story I had mentioned earlier, the feminist collective that visited Palestine back in 2011, talks about certain work permits, right? Palestine specific, and in very, very rare occasions, Palestinians are distributed work permits to enter Israel and have to line up in these barbaric corridors, entering into occupied territories of Palestine. So can you talk about that a little bit? How Palestinians can acquire a work permit? And yeah.
So part of Israeli bureaucracy is creating this maze of paperwork that Palestinians have to go through. The state of Israel requires permits for almost everything. There's only under Israeli military rule, there's about 102 types of military permits, for almost everything. Work permits is only one of those. So any Palestinian resident of the West Bank, if they wish to visit Jerusalem or to work on this side of the border, the west side of the border, they're required to have a military permit from the Israeli authorities. Those permits are issued to a maximum of 2% of the entire Palestinian population in the West Bank. And at some point it was a maximum of 500 out of 2 million people in Gaza, So it's just a military permit to move, So I live in Bethlehem here. The city of Jerusalem, the old town, is literally 15 minutes to drive away from me. So I need to get a military permit, which is a very weird application you submit to Israeli authorities, and then they don't tell you what the criteria is. So you do not know what to abide, the rules you abide to, because you don't know. So you apply, and then you either get a rejection or approval based on the decision of the Israeli soldier. Now your ID number is in their hands. They check your ID number, connect it to that of your father's, and then through that they create a network of your family. If a male member of that network, have broken any of the Israeli military rules, then you probably get denied that permit. It's not easy. And because it's very rare, we look at those who have military permits to be the lucky ones. And then we go to the passage points that the State of Israel have built to Palestinians with permits. It's like cages in a zoo. Literally, like cages that you find in zoos for animals. And Palestinians have to get through that. So Palestinians I'm talking about the privileged Palestinians are being treated worse than animals. And that fits with Israel's politics, because you read that word, right? That's an Israeli chief of staff. You read that word, right? That's an Israeli prime minister. The Israeli Minister of Justice was like, yeah, Palestinian mothers should be killed for giving birth to snakes and rats. The Israeli Minister of Defense, the previous one, he didn't call us animals. He called us human animals. And nobody liked him in the cabinet because he used the word human in the description. So they treat us worse than animals because they believe we're worse than animals. No. There is no language to describe Israel's savagery towards Palestinians, even on checkpoints. Thanks for bringing that up.
I don't need a microphone.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
go for it.
We're hearing talks of an imminent ceasefire in the coming days, and I was wondering if you could talk briefly about what work is left to do after we might get a ceasefire finally.
The work that needs to be done should focus on like holding every single Israeli criminal that participated in the genocide behind bars. So it's a lot of work because there's a lot of criminals. The second thing, I don't buy that. Like, be despair. But the state of Israel have created in Gaza is unimaginable. And the savagery that you see in Israeli media and Israeli politicians keep telling like, oh, we are negotiating ceasefire for nearly 460 days. Negotiating ceasefire. And then people will have their hopes up, and then they are crushed with bombs. And then their hopes up and crushed with bombs. So we'll see when they will crush it. The current deal that they are talking about was approved in May last year. You know? But like, why just stop murdering people in May? We go on until the game stops being useful. You know? The Orange Man came to them and told them like, hey, I want this to be resolved before I get into the office. He wants to have like a Reagan moment. And he will get his Reagan moment. You know? But like you're talking about abusing the despair of people that have been under bombardment and the denial of every single element of that is required for human survival. And then you play with them. You know? So the ceasefire will happen just like how it was back in October of 2003. It's in the hands of Israeli criminals. And it should not be in the hands of criminals. People's fate, people's lives should never be put in the hands of criminals. That's it. Like Palestine, they are.
Israel has Israel has co-opted the court movement to dress up as opposition especially for queer and trans Palestinians. Can you talk about the political repression of the army?
The state of Israel will use anything against you to blackmail you, to get you into submission, to get you into collaboration and things like that. And definitely, like, pinkwashing is a term coined to describe how the state of Israel uses like homosexual soldiers to murder Palestinians, or homosexual soldiers to check Palestinians on checkpoints, and blah 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 blah. They use anything at their disposal to maintain this regime. They use anything at their disposal to promote this regime as anything but a sick regime, you know? So that's it. The one thing I find like very weird is that the promotion of Palestinian society as like a homophobic society. Which is really weird, because in our society, your sexual orientation is your business. You know? You keep it private. Nobody wants to know about your sexuality in public. But here's one thing, we learned this from one of the first popular like homosexual communities on the planet. Like, you know, it's called Sodom and Gomorrah. You know? When the state of Israel comes around saying like they provide safety for homosexuals rather than exploitation of homosexuals, you know, they just claim history of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is crap and wrong. You know, it's like they do a lot of mess in order to promote themselves in every possible corner. But environmentalists, they call themselves, you know, we care about the environment. It's like, you covered the landscape of Palestine with 350 million pine trees. It's a dry land. Pine trees will burn the hell out of the place. Oops, Los Angeles got it very hard, you know? It's like, you can't plant those trees in places that are not wetlands. But they care about the environment. You know, Israeli regime used to be in bed with the Soviets and with the Americans during Cold War. No other regime on the planet was appealing to two superpowers other than the state of Israel. Why? Because they tell you what you want to hear. And instead of calling them liars, you believe them. But the state of Israel will abuse anything, you know, in order to promote itself in any corner of the world, including like LGBTQ and queer issues.
Can you go back home? Like if you wanted to just go to Bethlehem right now, could
Yeah.
you go?
I'm one of the survivors of Israeli criminal behavior who live in Palestine. Nearly half of our society is not allowed freedom of access to Palestine.
But you,
I personally, like, I live in Bethlehem, so they can't deny me. They can't kill me, but they can't deny me. Or they can prevent me from traveling. But anyways, they know what they can do, I know what they can do, it doesn't matter.
Where are Mubarak, Awad, and his brother that were expelled years ago?
Mubarak?
Awad and the Awad brothers, they were Palestinians, but
Yeah, Mubarak Awad, I think he lives in
He's in DC.
DC. Yeah.
his brother was a Methodist pastor, but I
Yeah,
think they're both out. I don't know where they are.
Well, I don't know where most of the 15 million of us are. I know we're on the planet. I know we are all over the place. But we're denied freedom in Palestine. The second largest Palestinian population outside of Palestine is located in Jordan. And then the third is, I think, around Syria until the war, so we don't know. And then there's a sizable Palestinian presence in Chile and in Peru. There's about 300,000 of us in the United States of America. So we're all over the planet, you know. And just like, no, I think we're better than any other society. I honestly believe, like, the majority of us are kind people, you know. Maybe we compete with the Irish, but still we will win. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, assuming that at some point Israel will decide that, well, enough Palestinians are dead, that we can probably let the rest live for a while, they're not gonna help rebuild Gaza. I'm sure, so my question, I have this IRA, which I've been told is totally inadequate, like, yeah, we don't need to talk to you, lady. But that's one of my ways I can protest, is I sent my major donation to Palestinian Children's Aid. I wanted to know, you know, what are the most solid places or organizations to give money to, because that was it.
Okay, أولى لك فأولى. How can I do that? In our indigenous wisdom, like the priority for your charity should be the people around your corner, the closer to you and the closer. And then Palestine, because if a homeless neighbor of yours knows that you skipped them to help a homeless Palestinian, that homeless person will hate you and will hate the homeless Palestinian. So when you do charity, try to look around you first, because maybe the neighbor you support, together with the neighbor you support, will you be able to do more support? It's in our indigenous wisdom, but it's strategic,
I just feel.
So that one thing. The second thing, the state of Israel never pays the bills for its destruction. It gets bombs for free, and then people pick up the bill and rebuild what Israel bombs for free. Which is wrong, but once again, this is how supporting the oppressor and the oppressed works. You supply the oppressor with the bombs, and you supply the oppressed with means to rebuild what the bombs have created. The largest supporter of Israeli criminal behavior financially is the United States of America. The largest donor to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East, is the United States of America. So when you think of support only in form of finances, nobody in the room can compete with the federal government. So try to use your resources to educate your neighbors and people around you, and together you will be able to support a lot more Palestinians, I promise.
Got you up there?
One last question.
What is the end game for the push into Lebanon? Is that really just about expanding territory and having more access to the sea, or is there something else?
I am the wrong person to ask this. Because the criminals in South Lebanon are the Israeli government. How far the Israeli government are going to go, only the Israeli government knows. But what we know is that when the state of Israel steals something, when it gives it back, it needs a medal. So when they stole Sinai, they demanded the Nobel Prize for returning Sinai. Yeah.
South Africa,
Yeah, like the Clark in South Africa. But treating the state of Israel that way is what normalized apartheid in South Africa. So I don't know what they will get for stopping to murder people in Lebanon and in Palestine. So they want the bribe in order to stop murdering people in Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. Who will offer them that bribe? I do not.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. You're losing your voice.
Thank you, Baha. And thank you all. We've been, we're giving you a book where people have written their
So you did
their
that.
comment.
You did that before listening to me. If anybody wants
No, it was circulating.
It was during.
because you have a chance to change your words.
Thank you so much, Shukran, and we wish you the best on the rest of your national tour. Yeah, that's the country.
But yeah, I think the information on the rest of the lectures are available. You can warn your friends. If you didn't like today, if you feel more confused and you think this is useless for your understanding of Palestine, please warn your brothers and sisters in the country. If you think it's useful, please try to support it in whatever means you can. Thank you so very much for today.